The rain drummed against my office windows like impatient fingers, matching the rhythm of my own restless tapping on the desk. I studied the photograph Thomas Reeves had left behind, his wife Aurora, captured at some high-end charity gala. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment. Thanks so much for watching. The image looked like it belonged in Vogue. Aurora's platinum blonde hair swept elegantly to one side, her emerald dress hugging curves that had graced magazine covers and luxury brand campaigns. Even in a candid shot, she possessed that effortless magnetism that separated true beauties from merely pretty women. Almost a year of marriage, and she's already getting restless, Thomas had said, his voice carrying the bitter edge of a man who'd been burned before. She's out every night, parties, events, always surrounded by admirers. My first wife cost me 50% of everything I'd built. I won't make that mistake twice. I'd seen his type before, older, wealthy men who collected beautiful women like trophies, then acted surprised when those women had lives and ambitions beyond being ornamental. Still, his retainer was generous enough to keep me comfortable for months, and I'd learned not to judge my clients too harshly. Everyone had their secrets. The next morning found me parked outside an upscale fitness studio in Pacific Heights, watching Aurora emerge in designer athleisure that probably cost more than most people's rent. Even post-workout, she looked like she'd stepped off a runway, her skin glowing with that healthy flush that came from expensive trainers and premium supplements. She paused to take a selfie against the studio's modern facade, her smile brilliant and practiced. Aurora Reeves wasn't just beautiful, she was a brand. Her Instagram boasted over 2 million followers, who hung on her every post about luxury travel, fashion collaborations, and lifestyle content. She'd built an empire from her looks and knew exactly how to monetize her magnetism. This wasn't some gold digger who'd trapped a rich husband. This was a businesswoman who'd simply chosen the wrong partner. I followed Aurora through her day. A photo shoot for a skincare brand, lunch with other influencers at a trendy restaurant where every dish was photographed before being eaten, an afternoon spent at a high-end spa being pampered for an evening event. Aurora moved through her world with confidence, comfortable in her skin and her success. The evening brought a gallery opening in Soma, where Aurora arrived like visiting royalty. She wore a black slip dress, her every movement calculated for maximum impact. Men gravitated toward her like moths to flame. But I noticed something else. Aurora's attention seemed to wander, her smiles never quite reaching her eyes. For all her social butterfly exterior, there was something lonely about her that the cameras couldn't capture. It was during the second week of surveillance that my perspective began to shift. I'd expected to find evidence of infidelity. A woman as stunning and socially active as Aurora surely had opportunities. Instead, I watched Aurora navigate her world with professional precision. Yes, she flirted, but it was the practiced charm of someone who understood that her beauty was her business. Every interaction was calculated, every smile strategic. But more troubling for me was my growing fascination with my subject. Aurora wasn't just another cheating spouse. She was intelligent, ambitious, and completely magnetic. When she laughed at something during a television interview, I found myself smiling. When Aurora posted a vulnerable moment on her social media, a sunset photo with a caption about feeling disconnected despite being constantly surrounded by people, I felt an unexpected pang of sympathy. By the third week, I had made a decision that went against every professional instinct. I was going to get closer to Aurora, not to find evidence of infidelity, but to understand the woman behind the perfect image. I began orchestrating accidental meetings. I showed up at the same coffee shop Aurora frequented, the same boutiques, the same events. It wasn't difficult. Aurora's schedule was largely public thanks to her social media presence. Our first real conversation happened at a book launch party in the Mission District. Aurora was there as a favor to a friend, looking slightly out of place among the literary crowd in her designer dress. "Not your usual scene?" I asked, appearing beside Aurora at the wine table. She turned, and up close, her beauty was even more striking. Her eyes were a remarkable shade of blue-green, like tropical waters, and her smile was warm despite its practiced perfection. "Is it that obvious?" Aurora laughed, a sound that was more genuine than the carefully modulated tone she used in her videos. "My friend guilted me into coming. Apparently, I need more intellectual stimulation in my life." "And do you?" I found myself genuinely curious about the answer. Aurora considered the question seriously. "I think I need more real stimulation, period. When your job is being beautiful and aspirational, sometimes you forget what it feels like to have conversations that aren't about brand partnerships or follower engagement." We talked for an hour about books, about art, about the strange isolation that came with public visibility. Aurora was sharp and insightful, nothing like the vapid influencer stereotype. When she laughed at my dry observations about the pretentious crowd, it was unguarded and genuine. "I don't think I caught your name," Aurora said as the evening wound down. "Jade. Jade Gonzalez." "Well, Jade Gonzalez, this has been the most interesting conversation I've had in months." Our paths began crossing with increasing frequency. Aurora seemed genuinely happy to see me, our conversations growing deeper and more personal. The second time we met was at a coffee shop in the Castro, where I'd positioned myself after seeing her Instagram story about needing real caffeine. She spotted me immediately and slid into the seat across from me without invitation. "Are you following me, Jade Gonzalez?" she asked with a smile that was part teasing, part curious. "Maybe," I admitted, surprising myself with my honesty. "You said you needed more real conversations. I thought I'd make myself available." We talked for 2 hours about everything except her marriage. Aurora spoke about her childhood in Orange County, her early modeling days, the strange evolution from wanting to be an artist to becoming a brand. I shared stories from my investigation work, my observations about human nature, carefully omitting the most relevant details. Our third meeting was at a small art gallery in the Mission, not one of her sponsored events, but a place she'd mentioned loving. I found her standing alone in front of a painting of a woman staring out a window, her expression unguarded and melancholy. "She looks trapped," Aurora said, without turning around when she sensed my presence. "Or waiting," I offered. "Maybe she's deciding whether to stay or go." Aurora finally looked at me, and I saw something vulnerable in her eyes. "Do you think she'll have the courage to leave?" "I think she already knows what she wants to do," I said softly. "She's just gathering the strength to do it." We had dinner that night at a quiet restaurant in North Beach, tucked away in a corner booth where Aurora could relax without worrying about cameras or recognition. She told me about the loneliness of her marriage, how Thomas saw her as an acquisition rather than a partner. I found myself sharing more than I intended, my own struggles with trust, my cynicism about relationships, the walls I'd built around my heart. "I haven't talked to anyone like this in years," Aurora said as we split a bottle of wine. "Usually people either want something from me or they're intimidated by what they think I represent." "And what do you think you represent?" I asked. Aurora's laugh was self-deprecating. "Success? Beauty? The perfect life?" She shook her head. "Most of the time, I feel like I'm playing a character in someone else's story." "What would your story look like?" She was quiet for a long moment, swirling wine in her glass. I don't know. I've been playing this role for so long, I'm not sure who I am underneath it all. Our fourth meeting was supposed to be casual, a walk through Golden Gate Park on a Sunday morning when Thomas was away at a golf tournament. But something had shifted between us. The air crackled with tension, and every accidental touch sent electricity through my body. Do you ever feel like you're performing your own life? Aurora asked, as we walked past the Japanese tea garden. She'd just responded to a fan who'd recognized her, all bright smiles and gracious charm. But the moment they left, her shoulders sagged slightly. Every day, I admitted. But lately, I've been wondering what it would feel like to stop performing and just be. Aurora stopped walking and looked at me intently. With the right person, maybe we could figure that out. The kiss happened the following week, in the penthouse Aurora shared with Thomas. Thomas was away on a business trip, and Aurora had invited me up for drinks after a charity gala, both of us slightly tipsy on champagne, and the electricity that had been building between us for weeks. I have to tell you something, Aurora said, setting down her wine glass and moving closer to where I sat on the plush sofa. I haven't felt this way about anyone in, maybe ever. Aurora. My voice held a warning, though I made no move to pull away as Aurora's fingers traced along my jawline. I know you're probably thinking this is crazy. I'm married, my life is complicated, I'm supposed to be straight. Aurora's laugh was soft and self-deprecating. But I've never cared about labels. I care about connection, about feeling alive when I'm with someone. And you make me feel more alive than I have in years. The kiss was inevitable, soft and tentative at first, then deeper as Aurora's hands tangled in my dark hair. I had kissed women before, had relationships and affairs, but nothing had prepared me for the intensity of wanting someone I was supposed to be investigating. Are you sure about this? I whispered against Aurora's lips, though my body was already responding to Aurora's touch with an urgency that left me breathless. Aurora's answer came in the form of her lips on my throat, her teeth grazing the sensitive skin just below my ear. I've never been more sure of anything. We moved to the master bedroom, all white silk and soft lighting, like something from a luxury hotel suite. Aurora's dress pooled on the marble floor beside my more practical clothing, and we stood facing each other in the dim light, taking in the sight of each other with wonder. Aurora's body was perfection, the kind of curves that sold millions of products and launched careers. But up close, I could see the subtle imperfections that made her human. A small scar on her shoulder from a childhood accident, freckles across her chest that makeup usually covered, the way she bit her lower lip when nervous. You're staring, Aurora said softly, but she didn't move to cover herself. You're beautiful, I replied honestly, but you know that. Aurora stepped closer, her hands moving to explore the planes of my more athletic body. Beautiful isn't the same as desired. I can count on one hand the number of people who've looked at me the way you're looking at me right now. Our lovemaking was passionate and urgent, each of us seeming to recognize something in the other that had been missing. Aurora responded to my touch with an abandon that was completely different from her public persona. Raw, genuine, vulnerable. She gasped my name when my fingers found exactly the right spot, her back arching off the silk sheets. I discovered that Aurora was sensitive along her hip bones, that she made the most beautiful sounds when my mouth traced the curve of her breast. Aurora learned that my composure crumbled entirely when lips trailed down my stomach, that I whispered her name like a prayer when the pleasure became too intense to contain. We moved together with increasing desperation, Aurora's legs wrapped around my waist as we found a rhythm that belonged to us alone. Our breathing synchronized, our hearts beating against each other's chests as waves of sensation crashed over us both. "God, Jade," Aurora breathed, her nails digging into my shoulders as her climax approached. "I never knew it could feel like this." My response was lost as my own release followed, intense and overwhelming, leaving me shaking in Aurora's arms. We collapsed together, sweat slicked and breathless, Aurora's head on my chest as we waited for our heartbeats to slow. "That was," Aurora began, then trailed off. "Yeah," I agreed, pressing a kiss to the top of Aurora's head. "It was." But even as we lay entwined in post-coital bliss, I felt the weight of my deception pressing down on me. Everything had changed in that moment when we kissed. I realized I couldn't continue spying on Aurora, not when I was falling for her, but I also couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that Thomas was hiding something. If he was so convinced Aurora was cheating, maybe it was because he was projecting his own guilt. The next day, I made a decision that went against every rule of professional conduct. I was going to investigate my own client. It didn't take long to find what I was looking for. Thomas Reeves was a creature of habit, and his habits included regular business lunches that lasted well into the afternoon at a discreet hotel downtown. His companion was Sarah Mitchell, a marketing executive at his company who was married with 2 young children. The evidence was damning. Hotel keycards, intimate photographs captured through restaurant windows, credit card receipts that painted a clear picture of an ongoing affair. Thomas Reeves was cheating on his gorgeous, successful wife while simultaneously trying to frame her for the same crime. I stared at the photographs spread across my desk, my mind racing. The irony was almost too perfect. The man who'd hired me to catch his wife cheating was guilty of the very crime he was trying to pin on Aurora. Over the following weeks, our affair intensified. Aurora would text me between photo shoots and brand meetings, stealing moments whenever Thomas was traveling or at the office. We met at my apartment, at discreet hotels, and when Thomas was away on business trips, at the penthouse they called home. Each encounter was passionate and desperate, as if we were trying to make up for lost time. Aurora began canceling social obligations to spend time with me, her carefully curated online presence showing subtle changes as she shared more genuine moments. Her followers noticed. The comments on her posts increasingly praised her for seeming more real and authentic. "You're changing me," Aurora said one evening as we lay in the master bedroom while Thomas was away at a conference, her fingers tracing patterns on my chest. "I used to think I knew exactly who I was, what I wanted. But being with you, it's like I'm discovering parts of myself I didn't know existed." The guilt was eating me alive. Every genuine moment we shared felt like another betrayal, another lie added to the foundation of our relationship. I knew I had to tell Aurora the truth, but the longer I waited, the harder it became to imagine a scenario where Aurora would forgive me. The revelation came because I couldn't bear to continue the charade any longer. We were in the penthouse while Thomas was at another business dinner, sharing takeout from Aurora's favorite Thai restaurant, when I finally found the courage to speak. "Aurora, I need to tell you something," I said, setting down my chopsticks with hands that trembled slightly. Aurora looked up from her pad thai, immediately reading something serious in my tone. "What is it?" I took a deep breath and told her everything. Thomas's suspicions, the original surveillance job, how I'd started investigating Thomas instead when I realized he was the one cheating. I explained about the evidence I'd gathered, about Sarah Mitchell and the affair that had been going on for months. Aurora listened without interruption, her face growing paler with each revelation. When I finished, the silence stretched between us like a chasm. So this whole time, Aurora said slowly, you were supposed to be spying on me. Yes. At first, my voice was barely audible. But Aurora, everything between us, was built on a lie. Aurora stood abruptly, pacing to the window. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant hum of the city below. I fell in love with you, I said desperately. That was never part of the plan. What we have together. What do we have, Jade? Aurora turned to face me, and the pain in her eyes was almost unbearable. How do I know what was real and what was just part of your… What? Your counter-investigation? I stood and moved toward her, but Aurora held up a hand to stop me. Everything was real. Every conversation, every kiss, every moment we spent together. I stopped caring about the job the first time you laughed at something I said. The job stopped existing the first time you touched me. Aurora wrapped her arms around herself, and for the first time since I had known her, she looked small and vulnerable. I trusted you. I let myself be completely vulnerable with someone for the first time in my adult life, and it turns out you were working for my husband all along. But now you know the truth about Thomas, I said urgently. Aurora, he's been cheating on you for months while trying to frame you for the same thing. You have everything you need to divorce him and take him for everything he's worth. Aurora was quiet for a long time, processing the implications. When she finally spoke, her voice was steady but distant. I need time to think about all of this, about what it means, about us. She moved toward the door, then paused. Jade, thank you for telling me the truth, even though it was hard, and for showing me what it felt like to be wanted for more than just my face. She left without kissing me goodbye, and the penthouse felt impossibly empty in her absence. For 5 days, I heard nothing. I went through the motions of my other cases, but my heart wasn't in any of it. I'd broken every rule of professional conduct and might lose the only woman I'd ever truly loved in the process. On the 6th day, Aurora called. Meet me at the St. Regis, she said without preamble. Presidential suite. I have a proposition. I found Aurora in the opulent suite, dressed in a sharp business suit that somehow made her look even more formidable than her usual glamorous attire. She was surrounded by legal documents, and her laptop was open to what looked like divorce paperwork. I've been busy, Aurora said without looking up. I filed for divorce this morning, cited irreconcilable differences, and included your photographs as evidence of Thomas's adultery. Aurora, I know I have no right to ask for your forgiveness. You're right, you don't. Aurora's voice was crisp, businesslike. But you also gave me something invaluable, the truth about my husband and evidence I can use. So I'm proposing a partnership. Over the next 2 hours, Aurora laid out a plan that was both elegant and straightforward. Using my photographs of Thomas's affair, Aurora would push for a favorable divorce settlement. Thomas could either agree to generous terms or face a very public trial where his infidelity would be exposed, potentially damaging his business reputation and social standing. The photographs you took are clear evidence, Aurora said, reviewing the images. My attorney says there'll be more than enough to support my case. Thomas won't be able to deny what's right there in black and white. I felt a wave of relief. Aurora could handle this herself. She didn't need me to compromise my professional ethics or reveal the original surveillance job. What will you tell him about how you got the photos? I asked. Aurora's smile was sharp. That I hired my own investigator when I suspected he was cheating. It's not far from the truth, is it? For the first time since my revelation, Aurora smiled. Not her practiced public smile, but something genuine and warm. Good, because I have another proposition for you. Aurora told me later about the confrontation with Thomas in his lawyer's office. She'd gone in with her attorney, armed with my photographs and a steely determination I'd come to admire. He walked in expecting a simple divorce discussion, Aurora recounted over dinner that evening, her eyes bright with satisfaction. Instead, he found himself staring at photos of his affair with Sarah Mitchell. You should have seen his face, Jade. He went completely white. According to Aurora, Thomas had tried to bluster his way out of it, claiming the evidence wouldn't hold up in court. But Aurora's attorney had been ready for that, explaining how adultery evidence could influence the settlement, even in a no-fault state. I gave him a choice, Aurora continued, her smile sharp with triumph. Agree to my terms, the penthouse, alimony, and a fair asset division, or watch me share those photos with every business associate and media contact I have. He chose discretion. The negotiations took less than an hour. Faced with professional and personal ruin, Thomas chose discretion. Aurora walked away with enough money to be comfortable for life and her reputation intact. 6 months later, I found myself in an unexpected position, head of security for Aurora Reeves Enterprises, the company Aurora had formed to manage her expanding business interests. I'd closed my private investigation practice and was learning about brand management, social media strategy, and the surprisingly complex world of influencer business. Any regrets? Aurora asked one evening as we reviewed contracts for Aurora's upcoming fashion collaboration. We were in the penthouse home office, the city sparkling beyond the windows. We'd been carefully rebuilding our relationship, taking things slowly, learning to trust each other completely. Aurora had scaled back her public appearances, choosing quality over quantity in her brand partnerships. She seemed happier, more grounded, though she'd lost none of her magnetic appeal. About which part? I asked, looking up from the legal documents I was reviewing. Giving up your career, taking a chance on this. Aurora gestured around the office, but I knew she meant more than just the business. I set down my work and moved to where Aurora sat, reaching out to brush a strand of platinum hair from her face. Aurora leaned into the touch, her eyes closing briefly. No regrets, I said softly. For the first time in my life, I feel like I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. Aurora's smile was radiant, free of the calculated perfection that had once defined her public image. Even though I'm probably the most high-maintenance woman you'll ever be involved with? Especially because of that, I replied, pulling Aurora into my arms. Besides, you're worth the maintenance. Our kiss was sweet and full of promise, tasting of the future we were building together, complicated, passionate, and entirely our own. Outside, San Francisco glittered with possibility, but inside the penthouse we now shared, surrounded by the life we'd created from the ashes of deception and betrayal, Aurora and I had found something rare. A love built on seeing and accepting each other completely, beautiful and flawed together. The rain that had started our story months ago drummed against the windows again, but now it sounded like applause.